The loss of a child is the end of a world. Preparing for that loss in the case of incurable illness must be the hardest road for any parent to walk. Many families want and wish that their child might stay at home until the very end, and yet a report by charity Together for Short Lives has found that in most areas of England, families are often unable to choose appropriate end-of-life care at home. A postcode lottery means it simply depends where a family lives. Much of the problem is about money, inevitably, but campaigners are working hard to make the stay-at-home option available to all. I'm joined now by Andy Fletcher from Together for Short Lives, and also Jennie Ludford, whose son Charles was 11 years old when he was diagnosed with a terminal brain tumour. Good evening and welcome to you both, and thanks for your time. Jennie, if I can start with you, tell me what happened to Charles.
So, Charles was a really healthy, happy, sporty boy who played for Coventry City Academy, was scouted, he was an excellent footballer. And then one day he started to be sick, and only happened a couple of times a week, took him to the doctors. Obviously, they thought it was a virus. It's hard seeing those pictures, actually, of him ill. Within the 3 weeks until he was diagnosed, obviously the GPs thought it was an ear infection. There was various different diagnoses given because it's so rare to have a child with a terminal brain tumour of Charles's age. But one day he came down the stairs. It was actually Father's Day 2019, and he couldn't walk properly on one side of his body. He was sort of limping, and he kept saying his right hand felt strange. So we called an ambulance, and unfortunately, Dr. Google, you look it up, we put in his symptoms, and the first thing it pumped out was most likely brain tumour. My husband went to A&E with him that night in Warwick, near where we live, and at 4:30 in the morning, I remember getting the message that said they've seen something on his brain. He's being rushed to Birmingham Children's Hospital for an MRI, and literally the next day he had the MRI. And, not long after that, they did a biopsy to confirm, but they then called us into a room and said to us, we're really sorry, Charles has got what's called a DIPG, a diffuse intrinsic pontine glioma. It is terminal. There is nothing we can do apart from 6 weeks palliative radiotherapy, and his expected life expectancy is 9 to 12 months.
My goodness. What a story to tell. And your experience, though, Jennie, was you received the help that you so desperately needed at that time, and your experience was that what you needed in your darkest day was available to you. Is that correct?
Yep, absolutely. The Warwickshire palliative team, amazing. We got discharged into their care about 2 months after Charles was diagnosed. At that point, the consultant who did the biopsy and who broke the news to us thought he only had weeks to live. So that was the 19th of August 2019, after he'd been diagnosed on the 15th of June. We thought we had literally weeks. He actually didn't die until the 13th of February 2020. Quite a few months, obviously, later. And that was through the brilliant palliative care, I'm sure, that we were able to have at home. So he didn't have to go into a hospice, which, would have been his worst nightmare. He hated hospital. And what it allowed us to do was to be able to have him at home, even in his own bedroom, because the palliative team managed to make adjustments to our house for things like having a stair robot, which he could sit on a chair, and we could get him up the stairs with this robot that went up the stairs, operated by my husband and I, which then meant that we could keep him in his own room and not have to change the lounge and do all these things that, made it more terrifying for him. So I think the palliative team in Warwickshire we're so lucky to have that. And I hate to think of any other family that doesn't have that choice. And when I actually see photos of children that I know have died, and I look at them, I think, gosh, they're in hospital. My first instinct is, gosh, the parents are obviously okay with that. But I'm guessing that they probably don't have a choice. If there isn't a good team of people that in your area can offer that end-of-life palliative care, then you have no option other than to be in a hospital or be in a hospice.
And Andy, if I could come to you now, that there seems tragically, it's such a shattering glimpse there that Jennie offers, but there's, to add almost insult to injury, there seems to be a postcode lottery dictating so much of modern healthcare in this country. In cases like this, though, it feels especially unbearable. Why is it variable? Why can some areas provide that kind of staying at home as a choice while others can't?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. It is unimaginable, and I want to thank Jennie for sharing that story. It's hugely powerful. I think, what we found in our report is that in 4/5 of areas in England, that standard, that choice is not available to families. And, as you say, that dictates a postcode lottery, depending on where you are in the country, depends on whether you have that choice as you approach the end of your child's life. I think there's a range of reasons for it, but I do think part of it is about the extent to which local areas prioritise children's palliative care in all the other things they've got to think about. And in Coventry and Warwickshire is a really good example of where local commissioners, the people who plan and fund those services, are making this a priority. And we think if it can be a priority in 1/5 of areas of England, it can be a priority in the other areas too. So I think some of it is about planning. Some of it is about workforce. We know that there aren't enough doctors and nurses being trained to look after these increasingly complex children at home. So we do need a plan to recruit and train and develop more doctors and nurses. And as you said at the outset, Neil, I think there is an element of funding. We estimate the shortfall is around £300 million, which in the grand scheme of NHS spending is obviously very small. We think that could have a really huge impact, not just on giving families that choice, which you've just heard for Charles was so hugely powerful, but also it will save the NHS money, because if children are looked after at home, particularly at night when they tend to be most likely to go into hospital, if we can keep children out of hospital, we save the NHS money. And also we support the well-being of families, because caring for a child with a life-limiting illness brings great joy, but it's hugely demanding. And if we get that care right at the end of life, then we support the physical and mental well-being of parents and siblings and the wider family.
Has this always been the case? It seems surprising that I would have thought that that nationally a priority would be children in that situation. And it doesn't seem, especially when you mention the relatively small sums of money, it doesn't seem too much to ask that the priority of families coping with those circumstances for their beloved child should have what they need, almost as a result of a national decision being taken to say, before anything else, this is a priority, we must have this.
Yeah, I think it has always been the case that children's palliative care is often supported and funded and by the generosity of the public. In children's hospitals, in children's hospices, and in the community, there are some great services out there. This isn't about the quality of the care that's available; it's just about the availability of it. I think there are some really good national standards and guidance and guidelines that local areas should be following. And, the government and NHS England have put some really good kind of national standards in place around this. But the reality is on the ground, there's a big difference between those national ambitions and what's happening locally. And I think that's about, as I said at the outset, people taking it more seriously and understanding that the needs of these children and families are complex. And there's going to be a growing number of them. We know it's trebled. The number's trebled in the last 20 years. We expect it to grow by another 50% in the next 10 years. So this is a challenge that's not going to go anywhere. And we need, as I said, national and local NHS decision making to really start to prioritise this group of children.
Jennie, you were nodding in agreement or in recognition with what Andy was saying there. What in particular was coming forth there that you would want to stress, given your particular experience?
That illnesses don't discriminate. You know, these life-threatening illnesses like cancer and all the rest of it don't discriminate on where you live, your age, your gender, your sex, anything. They happen. And, you know, it's only right that if you live in any part of the UK, you should be able to get the same choices and care that I have where I live. And, you know, there is nothing worse than knowing that your child's going to die. And, you know, at that point, anything that you can do to try and take the fear away for them, to stay together as a family. You've often got other children. So, you know, Charles has got a sister, Izzy, who's nearly 16. You know, the very fact that we could stay at home, he could be in our house, and she could come home from school and she could see him in the morning, and you know, we could eat meals together. Trying to keep a family together when you're facing back and forth trips to hospitals and all the horrible things that go on is so important, particularly when you know that you're going to lose one of those key members of the family. So I just think that the government, however it's funded, should be making sure that whether you live in Buckinghamshire, London, Oxfordshire, Warwickshire, wherever, that if you have a child that's got a life-limiting illness or, you know, terminal illness, the parent should be given the choice. And some parents will want to have the child in hospital or in a hospice because they're around other children, but you should be able to have that choice offered to you. And for us, you know, we could have lots of people call and visit us, his friends, relatives, and then the palliative team came as well, and they became part of our family. And I'm still good friends with quite a few of the members now, because they mean so much. It just means so much to have someone that you can stand on the doorstep when they're about to go, and you can just, I'd be there for like half an hour every time they're about to go and just go, and what do I say about this? And how do I answer that? And, you know, we would just chat away from Charles, who was safe in our house. And I had that kind of help and care on the doorstep. And there's nothing better than that. Hospitals are scary places, and hospices are amazing places, but your own home, where a child's got their toys, their things they like to watch, you know, their own bed, their sofa, and their parents and their sister and, you know, siblings, there is nothing better than that for a child that, you know, it hasn't got long.
Jennie, I'm at a loss for words to express all of the feelings that you've brought for me. And the images there of your beautiful boy, I don't know anything else that I can say other than, you know, I'm sure what you've had to say will have chimed so strongly with others who are going through something similar. So I cannot thank you enough for your bravery and coming forward with that account. So thank you so much, and also to Andy, such an important charity. It doesn't sound like too much to ask in the scheme of things, having seen the sorts of sums of money that our health service seems to shift around in other areas. Thank you both very much indeed. Thank you.